future? Do you think your competencies are up to date? Because you realize that as an accountant previously, you were simply preparing the 5 sets of financial statements, or rather financial reports, that were kind of meeting the needs of the businesses in the past. But what we're asking right now as an accountant, do you think in the next 5 years, in the next 10 years, these businesses will only need the 5 sets of financial statements that we are preparing? Of course, that is why you'll see companies transitioning towards mostly integrated reporting, just in a bid to try and fit into what is happening currently. But we've seen discussions coming up as a result of COVID-19, where we've seen mostly the New York Times doing articles and asking, is this the end of globalization? Is COVID-19 the end of globalization? And why they would ask that, it's very interesting, because you'll understand that as a result of COVID-19, there was some kind of interference of the supply chain, not just with regards to goods and services, but also with regards to labor. You realize that suddenly we woke up and one day labor couldn't move from one country to another country. We had some kind of scenario where we couldn't get goods and services and medical equipment. So that then raised questions on the issue of globalization, because we understand, of course, globalization basically is the interdependence of world economies, and this is mostly brought about by cross-border trade, because you realize that as a result, after the 1990s, after just the end of the Cold War and the end of the Soviet Union in the 1990s, what happened is that global economies rose and decided, you know what, we're going to come up with various unions, and we're going to try make the world a village. We're going to try ensure and minimize as much as we can the borders, and reduce reduce the strain you'd have to be able to supply goods in Uganda, to be able to supply goods in Tanzania. But what happened is that the world then shifted to globalization, where we were saying that, James Kimani, if you want your goods from Uganda, you're able to get them. If you want to supply goods somewhere else, you're able to do that freely. There's cross-border trade. There's the rise of issues where labor is able to shift to other countries. So and mostly a key factor that had a very great impact on globalization, it was the rise of the internet, because you realize that in the 90s, that is when the internet kind of started gaining mileage, and we started having a rise in how much people were using internet. So then this promoted globalization so much. But what happened is that as a result, so maybe Simon, you can help me mute our delegate. So as a result of say COVID-19, what happened is that there was some kind of interference with the supply chain. Suddenly we realized that actually as a world, we've relied so much on the East, we've relied so much on China to provide goods and services. And then suddenly we realized that actually if there's a challenge in say China, or say in the East, if there's a challenge say in the US, United States, that then has some trickling effects on what is happening in other countries. You realize that, for instance, in the 2008-2009 financial crisis that started in the USA, what happened is that of course we understand the history of that. There was oversubscription, or rather lending so much in a bid to tap into the real estate, which was booming at this time. But then what happened is that after the financial crisis happened, there was some kind of trickling event where of course, the value of the dollar went down. And what happened is that even African countries that were trading so much, that were very reliant on the US, started having this trickling effect, started having a problem with their economies. So that then started some kind of strain with regards to globalization. That is when we had leaders rising, and we had, for instance, recently Trump saying that, you know what, we need to move from globalization, that some of our economies, such as the US, are being hurt by globalization. We're not really reaping the benefits of globalization. So basically, that's what we'll be talking about. We'll be asking ourselves, is it a time we reconsidered how we are interacting with other countries as a country? And how are we learning from COVID-19? How is this going to impact globalization in the future? And then we'll go further and talk about governance and leadership. We realize that COVID-19, among other factors, have disrupted the economies, the world economies, has disrupted the supply chain. So then we'll be asking ourselves that at a personal level, as a CEO of your company, as a CFO of your company, as a departmental head in your organization, how then can you improve governance? How then can you improve governance by the board? How can you improve leadership by the executive say of your organization to just ensure that you stay resilient, so that in case we're having a rise of these challenges, you stay cushioned, yeah, against these particular challenges. So basically our competencies and learning outcomes we will seek to understand the impact of COVID-19 of globalization. Mostly this will be a very interactive session. I'll want to hear so much from what you think, from your thoughts on the same. The second thing we'll be talking about is that we'll want to understand the role of leadership in ensuring business resilience amidst the pandemic, or rather any pandemic. And we've realized that after COVID-19, we've had this word being used so much, business resilience. Are you resilient enough as a business? Are you agile enough? So we'll be talking about agility. How is agility affecting our businesses? Is it necessary enough? How then do we as leaders have agility in how we are managing our businesses? The third thing we'll be talking about, very key, we'll want to develop competencies on how to win in a disrupted world. And finally, we'll want you to share the lessons you have learned with your colleagues. So now, before we start, I'd like to hear from you. We have a set of accelerator questions that we just want to ask, and they just hold on. So the first question we're asking is, what is globalization? And I'll want to hear from you. Maybe you can just raise your hand, and so that we can be able to, Simon will help me with picking on you, and then you can share with us. The second thing we're asking is, what are the key events that you think have disrupted the world? Not just COVID-19. What else do you think is disrupting the world, and what do you expect will disrupt the world in the coming few years, in the coming 10, 20 years? The third thing we're asking you is, in your view, will COVID-19 result in the end of globalization? What do you think about that? We've had Trump saying, President Macron, for instance, saying, you know what, it's time that globalization was brought to an end. Let's hear your views on the same. The fourth thing we are asking is, what is the role of leadership and governance in achieving operational excellence in the organization? That's also a key thing we'll be talking about during the session. So maybe I'll allow the team to share with us. I can see Jason has raised his hand. So maybe we can hear from you, Jason.
Yes, Purity. Good
Yes,
afternoon,
Jason.
everyone listening. Thank you very much for this opportunity. I'd just like to quickly respond to question number 1 and 3. I hope I'm audible. So globalization, in my understanding, is basically the way in which the world has developed, such that we are more or less operating in a small village. We call it the global village. And essentially what we've seen is the mobility of the factors of production. So as Purity, you are able to transport yourself to any part of the world to be able to provide human labor. And also we are able to, say, procure goods and services from wherever it is to be able to help us in the production cycle to continue what it is we're doing. So the whatever developments happen, technological and the rest, that made the mobility of factors of production easier across the globe. That is what, in my thought, is globalization. And if you were asking if COVID-19 is going to result to an end of globalization, I think my very stark answer would be no. COVID-19 has, of course, created some disruptions in the way we used to operate, but I don't believe we are going to stop interacting with people from the rest of the world. We are actually going to need them more in being able to, one, fight COVID-19 and overcome it, and even as our economies, which most have been pointing towards a recession, as we try to pick up, we are going to need our brothers from the different parts of the continent to be able to just accelerate the pace and be able to get to the stages in which we hope to have been at as nations. So thank you very much for that.
Thank you so much, Jason. We really appreciate your views on that. So maybe I can also take another comment from any of the participants with regards to these questions. So Regan, I thought you had raised your hand, so maybe you can share any question.
Yes, Spirit, you can hear me.
Yes.
Yeah, good afternoon to everyone. I'll attempt question number 2. What are the key events? Okay, what are the key events that have disrupted the world? Some of the key events that have definitely disrupted the world, apart from the COVID-19, are those elements of terrorism that have led to some countries being given some we call them some advisory, and some organizations, some countries are also advising their members not to. They're giving them some. They're advising their members not to actually visit some of these countries. So those, to some extent, in my view, have also disrupted the world. So apart from the COVID-19 or the different pandemic with fails, the world wars that had happened there before, there is also these elements of terrorism that are currently affecting, that are for a long time had affected the developing countries. So that would be my take for question number 2.
Thank you so much, Regan, for sharing with us. So I can see Adam Sheikh is sharing, and he's saying globalization basically is the free movement of goods, services, and people across the world. So I see no one else has raised their hands. So I think we can proceed to get into the discussion. So basically, globalization is basically the growing interdependence of the world, and this interdependence could be across economies, cultures, populations, and it's mostly brought about by cross-border trade, just as Adam and Jason rightly put it. And you'll realize that it's very important to note that globalization has been retreating since the financial crisis of 2008 and 2009. Now, as we had introduced this, and when we were talking about financial crisis, we talked about what happened. In the US, what happened is that there was some kind of subscription of loans where banks, people went and there was some real estate boom. So what happened is that everyone went and borrowed from banks to just try and invest in the real estate. And then the real estate crashed, the US, in 2008. So what happened is that then banks were not able to people were not able to pay the amounts they owed to the banks. They were just some economic mess. The government tried to boost the banks by way of giving them trying to fund them to ensure that they don't go under. But then what happened is that as a result of this financial crisis, there was some trickling event in these other countries. So suddenly economies were struggling. The world GDP dropped, which is also similar to what is happening right now. That a crisis that starts in just one country. Of course, the virus started in Wuhan, in China. So as a result of what is happening, then we realize that actually IMF says that the world GDP is going to contract more than it contracted as a result of the Great Depression. Yeah. So we understand that, of course, the effects of the Great Depression spanned to over 15 years. The world wasn't able to recover until after just about 15 years. That's when economies were able to recover. So when we receive info from IMF and the World Bank from their reports and the McKinsey reports indicating that actually the world GDP is going to dip more than it ever has. Even before the Great Depression. That means that as a world, we may actually take about 15 years to be able to recover from the impact of COVID-19. However, we cannot be very certain about how well we're going to recover from this, because I mean this is something new that has happened. But and then something that is very critical to note is that globalization kind of works like a clockwork. So what happens is that whenever there's a challenge, say at one place, it kind of works like it works like a pulley system. So whenever there's a challenge at one point, the whole system tends to break down. Whenever there was a challenge that suddenly, for instance, Wuhan is not able to manufacture, Wuhan is not able to produce, and China in entirety is not able to produce, then we have a trickling event where we realize that Africa is not able to get medical supplies. We're not able to get PPEs. We're not able to get countries such as Spain are not able to get the amount of labor force they need to be able to boost the economy and such other things. So, and just a clear illustration of what happens and what has happened across the few years we've had since the 90s, the many years since 90s, is that globalization has grown so much. Right now, we can't imagine living without maybe depending on China. For instance, we can't imagine having an economy that is not dependent on the US. We can't imagine having an economy that is not dependent on these countries that are able to fund us. So for instance, I was looking at the Boeing Dreamliner, and I found this really interesting. You realize that for the Dreamliner, for instance, the batteries are from Japan, and then the cargo doors are manufactured in Sweden from a company in Sweden, and then the landing gears are actually manufactured from France. And you realize that, for instance, the wings are from Japan, the tail or the tail fin is from the USA, the wingtips are from the South Korea, and the stabilizers, the horizontal stabilizers, are manufactured in Italy. So this just basically is a very small illustration of what happens generally across the countries or across manufacturing. We realize that, say for instance, in Kenya, we are producing, if we're importing vehicles from some other countries, you realize that various parts are from different countries. That is just how much globalization has had an impact on the world economy. This is just an illustration of what is happening across the whole supply chain, rather across the whole economy. So we've had discussions on how exactly is COVID-19 going to affect globalization, because you realize that we suddenly woke up to the realization that most countries realize that actually what is happening is COVID-19 is kind of exposing the fact that we have been overly reliant in the East. And when I talk about the East, mostly I'm referring to China as an economy. I'm referring to China and how much we have become over-reliant in particularly their manufacturing. Because you realize that as I was looking at a certain documentary that was talking about various countries have invested in various fields in the world. So you realize, for instance, India, they became very invested in IT. They became very invested in IT. You realize that mostly in India, whenever you talk about IT systems, whenever you talk about operating systems, whenever you're talking about such other things, you realize that India will tend to come at the top of this conversation. So the same scenario happened with regards to China. What China did is that they heavily invested in manufacturing. So they decided that in like 10 years, they came up with a strategy that detailed that they want to take over the world with regards to manufacturing. So they invested in, be it steel manufacturing. They invested very heavily in basically construction. They invested very heavily in manufacturing, so that you realize that in every single country you visit, you realize that mostly production is from China, mostly manufacturing, whatever they're importing is majorly from China. Of course, we have other countries that have heavily invested in agriculture. Talk of Brazil, heavily invested in agriculture. Talk of very other many countries that invested in various things. But then we realized that China was basically the backbone of manufacturing in the world. When we're talking about medical supplies, when you talk about research with regards to medical supplies, we were mostly getting these supplies from China. So when the system kind of broke down, we had some trickling event where we are waking up and we're realizing that as a country, for instance, Kenya in just about April, when we started having some kind of rise in the number of COVID-19 infections, we realized that as a country, we are not able to test as much as we wish we could. That we don't have, of course, there's the labor capacity. We don't really have the capacity, but we also don't have the equipment. We don't have the reagents to be able to test because of our over-reliance on say, the West or the East. And then so those who are talking about globalization and whether it's going to end, and I was drawn to a comment made by President Macron when he issued a statement as a result of how, or rather on how France was going to fight COVID-19. He mentioned that we have to think about the unthinkable, that globalization could actually be facing its end. Now we are seeing France being kind of against globalization. They want us to be more patriotic. They want us to depend mostly on ourselves and build internal capacities. Now the other person who's been very against globalization is President Trump, where he says that in the UN General Assembly of 2019, this was before COVID-19. Now Trump mentioned that the future does not belong to globalists and it belongs majorly to patriots. Now another key example that actually pointed out to the fact that their globalization could be facing an era. Look at the xenophobic attacks just in South Africa. You realize that in as much as South Africa is not coming out very clearly and saying that we don't want some element of globalization, and particularly in the labor market, you realize that xenophobic attacks happen every, is it 10 years? They happen at a certain period. And then you realize that this could be actually a threat to globalization, where South Africans are feeling like Probably these other nationalities are coming to take over our jobs, they're coming to take over our industries, and we are not able to compete sufficiently with them. This is a similar scenario that could be happening in the US, where they're feeling that actually as a country, we are suddenly, yes, please. I thought maybe someone had a question. You realize that the US is very key, and you saw President Trump wanting to have borders, being built, to have a wall being built, because they're feeling like, you know what, probably globalization is not doing us so much good. Yes, it's doing us good, we're able to supply, but we're not able to get as much as we're giving. So that could be a view of most people, and I don't know what you think about that. Maybe you can share in the chat box what your thoughts with regards to the same are. But we also have people who, like Jason, who shared that he feels like probably this is not the end of an era. Probably we're going to either have the same old systems in place, or we're going to have a new normal. Probably we need to reconsider how we are looking at globalization as a world economy. So I was drawn to reactions of a certain scholar, in the Oxford University, and he was saying that you need to consider that even as we're saying that probably, and maybe as some leaders are saying, look at what globalization is doing to us. Suddenly we are too reliant on China, and suddenly we don't have medical supplies. And I'm sure we saw such a scenario in America, where they realized that actually we didn't purchase enough PPEs. Suddenly COVID is here with us, and we don't have enough PPE, we don't have enough masks, we don't have enough of such other things. So, but then there are people who are saying that, you know what, globalization is not actually to blame for the virus. Actually, the virus is affecting globalization and not the other way. So they're saying, you know what, in as much as we're trying to say that it's time that we stop being overly dependent on globalization, saying, you know what, guys, it's time to realize that actually globalization is actually being impacted as a result of COVID-19, and not the other way around. That, for instance, COVID-19 is impacting globalization and not the other way around. Globalization is not bringing a rise to COVID-19. So then these scholars are of the view that why should we let go of its many advantages, such as, say, competitive pricing, to do something beyond the system. That COVID-19 is something beyond the system. The system here is globalization. Globalization was working pretty well. I was able to get goods and services on time. I was able to import, and therefore economies were growing so much. Look at Rwanda and how much they've grown as a result of not just their PFM systems, but how they looked at the whole export systems in their country. So they are saying, you know what? Why let go of globalization, yet it has numerous advantages, simply because it was affected by COVID-19. So, and another very key another very key element we need to consider before we look at whether we need to change maybe how we view globalization is the issue of decoupling. Now, basically, when you talk about decoupling, we're talking about how we are going to change the systems, because we realize that it may not be very possible, it may not be very practical to say that, of course, we are reconstructing the whole supply chain. We are changing how the internet works because we've over-relied on the internet. So we are changing how the whole supply chain works, because you realize that there's some kind of interdependence that we've created that shifting away from, or rather decoupling from, would seem almost impossible. So then we're asking you, how do you think you could change, or rather the change in globalization could affect your business? Do you think it's critical? And as we proceed, there's some key questions that I would like maybe to draw to the attention of the audience. And I was thinking about this and looking at just Kenya. And the key question I had first and foremost is the world looking at the pandemic merely as a crisis that needs to be mastered, or as an opportunity? Look at how Kenya has handled COVID-19. Maybe I can take reactions from the team. Do you think we have simply gone ahead to look at this as simply as a pandemic to master, where we're saying that we simply want to reduce the infections we want to plateau the curve, and then we'll ensure after we're done with that, then we can proceed with business as usual, that we can then proceed with our procurement practices as usual? So the question that I was being drawn to is, as a country, do you think we've handled this pandemic as just a crisis that we're going to master, and then suddenly our kids will go back to school? we are then going back to have the normal that we are so used to? Or is it an opportunity for us? Do you think that as a country, even as we are giving incentives to be able to cushion the country against the effects of COVID-19, do you think these particular incentives and these particular programs are meant to look at this as an opportunity? Are we then building internal capacity for production? Are we then building competencies with regards to production and manufacturing in the country? So maybe I can then take responses from the team with regards to the same. Generally as the world, do you think we've seen this as an opportunity? Do you think we have grown as a result of COVID-19? Or we are simply going to move on from COVID-19 and then after we've mastered the crisis, we move ahead? So maybe you can share with me with regards to the same. Now, the second question I'm asking is, do you think becoming independent from other countries makes business sense? Do you think us becoming independent and us producing our goods and services and us trying to achieve some element of independence, say not, of course, we cannot achieve 100% independence, but say 80% independence on how we are producing as a country, does it make business sense? Is it going to improve us as a country? The third thing we're going to ask is, do you think it's time to shift from the concentration of suppliers to more resilience? And this I'm asking because you realize that concentration of suppliers was mostly in the East. We were mostly, the concentration of suppliers was in the East, manufacturing was mostly in the East. Do you think it's time for us as a world to shift concentration of suppliers and then decide that we're going to get into more resilience, that we're going to build systems that are not just efficient, but are resilient? So maybe you can share your views on that in the chat box, or you can, better yet, you can raise your hand so that you're able to share with us. And particularly, I'd like to ask for the Kenyan case. Do you think we have simply looked at it as a crisis to be mastered or as an opportunity for us to grow? And I can see we have delegates from Uganda. So maybe Esther, you can also share with us. Do you think Uganda is handling COVID-19 basically as a crisis where you want to master the crisis, or you want to grow yourself, or you're looking at it as an opportunity? So next, we've then talked about leadership and how governance is going to change, how leadership is going to change, how the world is going to be disrupted. So the next thing we're asking ourselves is, who are these leaders who have stood out? And then we can then borrow these lessons from these leaders so that we're applying them at organizational level. Now, the first session of this, or rather the first part of this session, was basically to talk about globalization. Is it time to learn? How are we going to learn? And then the second thing, you realize that if there's a disruption that is taking place, then there needs to be also a shift in leadership. There needs to be some element of shifting of how, say, organizations are being managed, how CFOs are conducting their business. It's not business as usual. Now, I'm drawn particularly to the response of two very critical leaders. The very first one is Adam Silva. Adam Silva is the CEO of NBA. Yeah. So what happened is that the moment NBA, of course, the season was happening in March when we had the rise in COVID-19 infections. What Adam Silva did, of course, with support of the board of NBA, is that they suspended the season. They said, you know what, we're going to suspend the season. We're not going to put our people at risk. And this was even before the World Health Organization declared COVID-19 as a pandemic. Yeah. You see what's happening. These guys come and say, you know what, we are not going to continue holding the season, the NBA season, we are going to suspend it. And then about a day later, WHO says, you know what, we are realizing that this is a pandemic. So it's good that NBA is going to be suspended. It's good that we need to shift how we are doing things. Another very critical person is Jacinda. Jacinda Ardern is the Prime Minister of New Zealand, and she stood out very greatly with regards to communication. The moment the first case was reported in New Zealand, what happened is that Ms. Jacinda, of course, with the support of the government, came up very strongly with regards to communication, and she actually put almost all regions in her country under lockdown. That is what she did, way before most world leaders were able to do that. And she communicated this with so much empathy, so much so that once a poll was conducted in New Zealand that was asking guys to say how well they think their government handled COVID-19. Most people, 90% of those who are interviewed say that, you know what, we're really content with how well Jacinda managed COVID-19 in the country, how well we've been able to kind of control the rate of infections. Now, why am I bringing the example of these two particular leaders? Now, it's important to note that whenever disruption is happening, we've talked about technology could lead to disruption, COVID-19 could lead to disruption. But whenever disruption happens, or whenever we are facing some element of ambiguous threat, whenever a disruption is happening, normally the subconsciously the human mind tends to approach, or rather employ some approach of the wait and see approach. That is what happens. Everyone tends to do that, where we're saying that we're going to delay and see how this is going to affect us before then we decide how we are going to react to this. Look at a very critical example. Look at the American example, where just before COVID-19 got to America, what happened is that we had Democrats saying, you know what, you need to buy more masks, you need to buy more PPE for our medical experts. But what happened is that the government took a wait and see approach, where they were saying, let's first see what happens. Let us wait for about 2 weeks and see what is going to happen. Then later on, they realized we've actually gotten to a point where we are not able to get these supplies for our country people. So that is the human mind. That is what we tend to do. Whenever we face an ambiguous threat, where as a leader, you're not able to say that this is going to be the impact of this particular thing that is happening, what we usually do is that your instincts tend to tell you that, you know what, Purity, hold on, let's wait for more information, let's see what happens. But look at these two leaders. This is not what they're doing. They realize that we're having the COVID-19 pandemic and we're having a change in the dynamics. There is a shift in the dynamics. And so what they're doing is that they're getting right into action. They're directly saying, you know what, we are going to start. We're not going to wait. We're going to be agile enough. We're going to be agile enough. We're going to do things immediately. We're not going to wait. So the very first lesson that we need to learn as there's going to be a change. We don't know what is going to happen with regards to globalization. We don't know how a drop in GDP by greater than actually 6%, 9%. GDP is going to drop, but there's going to be a decline of greater than 9%. We're not sure. This is some kind of ambiguous threat. We don't know how well governments are going to recover. We don't know how well as trade unions we're going to recover. So the very first lesson you need to take from this session is that it's instinctive for you to take a sit down and wait approach as a leader. But right now, as we're getting into a disrupted world, as economies are changing, as the business model is changing, you need not wait. You need to go beyond your instincts. And rather than wait for additional information, it's important for you to realize that you need to act with urgency. Rather than downplaying the threat, there's usually that feeling where we tend to say, you know what, I'm going to downplay the threat. I realize that currently there's a scandal that is going to threaten my organization. And we've seen that happen, say, for mostly in banks. Look at what happens for a certain bank that currently has loans of up to 3.9 billion, and they are in assets and are just about 4 billion. But you see that they're also taking a wait and see approach, that yes, we realize that our profits are dipping, that we are reporting profits of just about 600 million every year. But what we're going to do is that we're going to wait and see what is going to happen in the next 2 years. We're going to pursue we're not going to pursue new markets. We're going to just wait and see. Now, another instinct that is likely for you to, or rather another thing that people tend to do, is that you get to double down to explain your actions more clearly. But we're encouraging right now that as we're getting into a disrupted world, whenever you notice that there's an ambiguous threat that is facing your organization, is facing your responsibility, the major thing that you need to do as a leader is take responsibility and focus on solving the problem. Very critical. Rather than wait for the information, take responsibility. Say, you know what, and that was very clear. And I think that is what put Miss Jacinda Ardern at the top of the charts with regards to handling of the crisis, is that she said, you know what, I'm going to take responsibility. I'm putting the country on lockdown, but not just doing that. I'm going to go beyond that. I'm going to ensure that all my citizens are cushioned against this particular thing that is happening. Now, I'm going to ensure that we're not just locking down the country, but we're looking at ways to solve the problem beyond locking down the country. How are we going to solve this problem? How are we going to ensure that our medical supplies are up to date? How are we going to boost the internal production capacity of New Zealand as a country? Now, that is something we need to think about. That, as says Timasako, you realize that there's some kind of disruption that is taking place, that people are no longer depositing as much as they used to deposit. So what then do you need to do? How are you going to solve this problem? How are you going to produce products that are then suiting the market so that then you remain relevant in the next few months? Now, the next thing that is very relevant as an organization that you need to ensure that you're doing whenever you realize that there's some element of ambiguous threat is to ensure that you're constantly updating your stakeholders. Very critical. Now, later as we'll be talking about leadership, we'll be talking about how stakeholder engagement. Now, we understand that whenever we talk about the elements of PFM, public finance management, when you talk about public finance management and basically financial management at institutional level, one of the things that are usually very critical and also in governance is the element of stakeholder engagement, where you're told that as you're engaging with your stakeholders, you need to identify the 80-20 rule, where you identify your most important stakeholders who bring 80%, your 20% of stakeholders who bring 80% value creation to the organization. And you need to be very critical and to be very keen on how then you engage in these stakeholders. So whenever you notice that there's an ambiguous threat, say as an organization, you're facing some element of maybe you're getting into bankruptcy, or say you've noticed that your profits have been dipping, say you notice that you're facing some kind of threat as a result of COVID-19, ensure that as a leader, as a CFO, as a departmental head, you're constantly updating your staff on what is going to happen. Now, I was seeing some organization that was really failed so much in terms of constantly updating their staff. Now, and we've had this happening even in Kenya, where a certain audit firm sent their staff home and sent emails to their staff telling them, you know what, as a result of COVID-19, in the next 6 months, you may not still be engaged in our organization. That then points out to a failure in the communication systems of this organization, that you need to update your staff constantly and tell them, you know what, we realize that as a result of COVID-19, our profits are dipping. So please note that in as much as you're getting full salary right now, please note that we've done some element of forecasting, and we've realized that in the next 3 months, this is how we expect our profits are going to look like. In the next 6 months, this is what is going to happen. So therefore, we expect that maybe in the next 3 months, you'll get half salary. So ensure that as a leader of the organization, whether be it your side hustle, you're keeping your employees, you're keeping constant communications, not just with your employees, not just your stakeholders, say the government, but even your shareholders. Simon, you can help me mute. So you ensure that you are constantly communicating, you are over communicating. Now, remember recently we were talking about change in strategy and how we are currently working from home. Now, remember the speaker sharing with us that this is the time to now over communicate, because we are not in the traditional kind of work environments that we had previously. So if you realize that you are a staff member and you don't want to be overlooked and you don't want your boss to assume you're not really doing as much as you need to do, this is a time to over communicate. So it's the same thing that needs to be done in organizational level. But this is a time to over communicate as an organization. This is a time to keep sending newsletters to your clients and telling them, you know what, we understand that COVID-19 is here, but we're going to be back. Yeah, we understand that currently you're not able to attend trainings physically, but you know what, we're going to issue you with online trainings that meet your needs. That is some element of communicating. So go beyond your instinct that tells you, let's sit and wait for more data. Try and over communicate and over communicate with your stakeholders. Now, the key questions maybe I will pose to the team as we proceed. Now, and I can see Zacchaeus is commenting on the Boeing Dreamliner, that globalization helps people to do what they're best at with the least inefficiencies. Without globalization, life would be more costly. Thank you so much for your views on that. I think that was in response to the question on globalization. So maybe as we finish, I'll let Zacchaeus also share on that. I can see Mr. Kivuli, FCPA Kivuli, has also commented on the issue of globalization. Very key. Another issue I'd like us to talk about, you can raise your hand or post in the chat box. The first question I'm asking, as we are talking about leadership, how has COVID-19 impacted your organization? First question. The second thing we're asking is how has the organization adjusted in response to the effects caused by the pandemic? And the third thing we're asking is, how has COVID-19 changed you as an individual, be it in relation to your side hustle, be it in relation to your leadership capabilities, be it in relation to maybe how you handle issues on risk and internal controls. So maybe I can take responses on the same. I'm very interested in this question. If anyone would like to respond to it, you can just raise your hand. on how you think COVID-19 has affected you, so that then we can talk about how prepared you are for the future. Yeah. So maybe you can share that on the chat box in the interest of time. But now I would like to bring some very interesting thing, which is actually the meat of our distraction, our discussion today. We've talked about globalization. We've talked about how globalization is changing the market dynamics. So let's then talk about how you can win in a disrupted world. The world is getting disrupted. Technology is changing the world. How then can you win as Esther in the campus as the leader of say finances at Makerere? How are you able to improve, rather to improve how management of finances are done? Now I was drawn to 6 key elements. Now please don't imagine this just in relation to CEOs. Now, this could relate even to departmental heads, even to you as a leader of your own side hustle, even at personal level. Now, there are 6 key elements that usually are tested, or rather are usually describe the role of leaders in an organization. I'll not talk about leaders, CEOs, I'll talk about mostly leaders, because you understand that being CEO is not always equal to leadership. Management is not always equal to leadership. Evans has told us that numerous times when he was talking about leadership levels. Now, there's a report that was done by McKinsey that then looked at the 6 key elements that then look at your leadership at organizational level and at governance levels. So these are the 6 key things that you need to tap. These are the 6 key things that you need to win at to ensure that you remain relevant in this disrupted world. Now, we understand that, of course, the role of the CFO, departmental head, leader of the organization, sustainability leaders at organizations, salespeople at organizations, of course, spans across strategy, spans across engagement, spans across stakeholder engagements, spans across, say, teams and processes and organizational alignment. So we are talking about the 6 key elements and how then you can be able to win in these 6 key things so that you ensure that you're winning in a disrupted world. So as a leader of the organization, the very first thing that you need to consider as the world is changing, because you realize that as a result of COVID-19, say for instance, your business model kind of employs the traditional systems, say you're not using AI as much as you'd expect. The world is moving. Now, this reminds me that when we're talking about the role of auditors in this changing world, we mentioned that currently auditors were reporting that only 4% of auditors were shifting as much as they should with regards to AI and machine learning. That's something to think about. But that is besides the point. Let's talk then about corporate strategy. How do you ensure that as a leader of your organization, as a leader of your department, as a leader of the small team you're having, that you're winning? The first thing you need to consider is corporate strategy. Now, it's important for leaders then to notice that they need to focus on beating the odds. Now, what then are the odds in this case? Now, a report was done by McKinsey that detailed that across 10 years, only 1 out of 12 companies are able to rise from being a middle income company and being a middle performing company to a top company. Over 10 years, just 1 out of 12. So those are the odds you need to identify as a CFO, as a CEO of this organization, that actually the odds are that only 1 in 12 are able to change their organizations across 10 years. And this is when the organization is not disrupted. This is when we are working with the normal, when everything is constant, when the market dynamics are the same, when systems are the same, when the supply chain is the same. Only 1 out of 12 CEOs are able to grow their companies. So much so, they move from, say, the 3rd quintile to the 5th quintile, which is just about 80 to 100%, 80 to 100 of the top performing entities. So the first thing you need to note is to focus on beating the odds. These are the odds. How then can you beat the odds? You need to, this has been broken down into 3 elements. The very first thing is vision. The second thing is strategy and resource allocation. As a CEO, as a leader of your business, you need to look critically at these 3 elements for you to be able to win in a disrupted world. Vision. How then can you improve your vision of an organization? It is time for us as leaders at organizational levels. It's time for you as leader of, say, Steam Asako, as leader of Ketraco, to identify what winning means for you. Now, winning is very different from, say, your organization vision and mission, because your vision could say, as Capable, we want to be the best training firm and consultancy firm in, say, Kenya. Yeah, that could be our vision. But then you need to reframe what winning means to you as an organization. Is winning to you, does winning to you mean tapping into other businesses? For instance, we've seen at Capable, we are trying to get into issues of audit. So you need to reframe what winning means for you as an organization. Right now, winning may not just mean surviving the crisis, and we were talking about it. Are we just looking to survive the crisis, and that is all? Right now, that is not what winning may actually mean for organizations. This is the time, as a leader, you need to tell yourself that this is the time we need to have objectives, or rather a strategy that then means that we're not just winning in this particular field, but we are tapping into new organizations and ensuring that your vision is very clear with the people you're working with. So the second thing is strategy. You need to make bold moves early. Now, we have said that it is instinctive for human beings to take a wait and see approach, that I realize that we are facing some kind of threat. I'm not able to understand what is happening. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to wait and see. But as a leader, for you to remain relevant is for you to you need to come up and make bold moves early. This is when, as a leader, with regards to strategy, you need to pursue innovations. Now let us talk about Safaricom. We all know Safaricom is maintaining the biggest market share in Kenya. Yeah, they currently stand at about 70% as compared to Airtel. Airtel is about 30%. They hold about 24% of the market share. The rest is shared among Equitel and these other telecommunications providers. Now, what Safaricom has done is that they realized that beyond just providing telecommunication services, they went and tapped to a new innovative product. What they did is that, of course, they were in the same playing field with Airtel some time back, yeah. But then they came up with innovations, and that is the M-Pesa innovation. They realized that, you know what, guys need to send money. And so we're going to tap into this innovation. Now, what has happened is that many years later, Safaricom still holds the largest market share with regards to the same. They hold the largest market share. So what we are saying, what we are insisting is that the fastest, keeping all other factors constant, the fastest will always win. The fastest person will always win. At an organization, if your responses to clients are, say, about 1 day, in some other organization, having the same systems, having the same product, having the same services, does it at 30 minutes when you're doing it at 1 hour, they will always win. More customers will be drawn to them. So very critical for you to understand, as a CEO, as a leader of the organization, this is a time to tap into new innovations. This is a time to tap into new markets. This is a time to ask yourself questions with regards to if we are offering consultancy services, do we need to go beyond just advising on, say, governance and such other things? Innovate as a leader. The other thing that is very critical is resource allocation with regards to corporate strategy. As an organization, this is the time to reallocate resources. Now, a survey was done that indicated that of 1 out of 3 CEOs, we say that just 1 out of 12 organizations is able to move in 10 years to the top quartiles. And another research was showing that just 1 out of 3 CEOs constantly have resource reallocation in the organization. Of course, you'll say that we are doing budgets and we try as much as possible to reallocate resources during budgets. But this is the time to realize that you cannot just wait for a whole year and wait for the whole budget process for you to be able to reallocate resources. If you are to stay winning in a disrupted world, because change is happening faster than 1 year, technology is changing faster than 1 year. So then you need to reallocate your resources as often as you can, so that you're looking at, say, this year we spent 50 million on, say, innovations. Is it time to focus on having more money in innovations as compared to more money, say, spent on other elements such as, say, doing market surveys and such other things? So it's very important as a CEO, if you are to win in the disrupted world, you need to do constant resource reallocation. Stay active on your resources. Stay active on cash and treasury management. Now, we've realized that most people are coming for seminars right now on treasury and cash management, because this is a time to look at your resources and decide, you know what, I'm going to do better. I'm going to I'm sorry about that. I was just handling something. So we were talking about resource allocation. This is the time to focus on, to stay very active on cost management and such other things. As a leader of the organization right now, it's not the time for the CEOs to decide that it's only the CFO who will be concerned with issues on cash management. This is the time to decide that, you know what, everyone in the organization is going to get very involved with regards to resource allocations. So the second thing that is very critical, organizational alignment. When you talk about organizational alignment, one thing that will set you apart from other leaders is for you to manage performance and health of the organization. And how are you going to do that? By being very critical with regards to the talent agenda of the organization. Now, of course, recently we've had the talent agenda being kind of left to the human resources. Mostly you're saying that it's the job of the human resources to ensure that we have the right people on board. But right now, as a leader of your organization, right now as a leader of your department, it's important for you to understand that you need to tap into talent. And when you talk about talent, we're talking about matching talent to value. When you talk about matching talent to value, bring the right people. Now, of course, because of the changes that are happening in COVID, we understand that most people are currently unemployed. Changes have happened. Right now is the time you can actually get the best talent for the least amount of money you'd have gotten it for previously. Because most people, very good people, are out there without jobs, people who can bring value to the organization. So as the organization, when you notice that there's a shift, say for instance, that has been brought about by COVID-19, this is a time to get new talent in your organization because you can be able to get it and keep it and be able to afford it. The second thing that you need to note with regards to organizational alignment, as a CEO, as a leader of your department, it's the time to relook. You need to relook the culture of the organization. You need to go beyond employee engagement. Now, whenever we talk about operational excellence, basically this is being on top of the game as an organization, being on top of the game as an individual. We talk about employee engagement, and there's a difference between employee satisfaction and employee engagement. Now, be very critical. Let's be very clear here. We're saying that you need to go beyond employee engagement. Now, employee satisfaction is purity as staff of Capable Limited saying, you know what, my health insurance is great. I'm getting great benefits at Capable. I'm satisfied. I'm happy. I'm well engaged. I'm happy. I'm doing what I can. I'm doing just enough. But employee engagement can only be done by leadership engagement. And good leaders go beyond just ensuring that employees are satisfied. When we talk about employee engagement, it means that you have spurred in me some passion so that I'm able to look at my job passionately. I'm able to pursue what I'm doing, or rather the organizational vision and strategy passionately. You need to go beyond just ensuring that your employees are comfortable enough with regards to, say, their payments and such other things and the environment. As a leader, it's important for you to note that you need to engage them effectively, that you need to ensure that employee engagement is maximum, that these people are passionate enough, you're stirring passion. And how can you do that? I really love statistics. I'm a statistician, so I love data. And so I'll refer most of my examples to surveys that have been done before. A survey was done before that then was asking, how do you gauge leadership engagement and employee engagement? How do you ensure that your leadership engagement is at par? And three critical elements stood out during this survey. First thing employees said is that they noticed that a leader is engaged, or they have proper leadership engagement if, first and foremost, they perform their tasks effectively. That is in relation to yourself as a leader. But the second thing that drew my attention is that they said that this person has to support the team. This person has to support the team. For me to ensure that we have proper leadership engagement, this is someone who supports the team. When I talk about supporting the team, it means that you're able to build passion in your team. Third thing that is very critical for you to win in a disrupted world is organizational design. Combine speed with stability. Now, we have said speed is very important, that the fastest innovator will win, will enjoy the market share for the next 10 years, uninterrupted market share. They'll enjoy maximum sales for the next 20 years before someone else innovates something better. That is a fact. But in as much as you're chasing speed, chase it with stability. That is where we talk about business resilience. Now, we understand that the term agility is currently being used and being misused, because people are saying that we are chasing agility. We want to become a very agile business. So we want to chase agility, and we want to do really well in terms of agility. But you need to note that agility doesn't just mean speed. Agility basically is pursuing speed, but pursuing it with so much strategy. So as a leader, ensure that in as much as you're rushing to innovate, in as much as you're rushing to reallocate resources and staying active with the same, ensure stability. Ensure that all your results, or rather all the decisions at the organization are actually backed by data. They are backed by data. Yeah, know your data very well. The other thing that you need to master as a leader is team and processes for you to win in a disrupted world. And how do you master team and processes? The very first thing, teamwork, show resolve. Ensure that you're boosting teamwork in your organization. And the second thing that is very critical in the interest of time is decision making. Defend against biases. Now, it's important to note that a survey done by a certain institution indicated that 90% of challenges that face, say, capital financing or capital projects are usually as a result, or rather, particularly in the overrunning of finances with regards to capital financing, is usually as a result of biases. Where as a leader of the project, you feel like, you know what, I'm simply going to ignore the data, that the data is saying that I need to buy or rather invest in this particular project here, but I'm simply going to ignore it and decide, you know what, I think this has better odds, so I'm going to invest in that. And that is what results in overrunning of finances. 90% is as a result of biases. So the first thing as a leader, it's important to understand that your natural instinct, as we have said, our instinct is to wait and see. Our other instinct is that we tend to be very biased with regards to the people you're bringing on the team, with regards to the projects you're bringing into the team, with regards to the innovations you're allowing in the team. So it's very important for you to defend yourself and to defend against biases at the organizational level. How can you do this? Come up with a task force that is very independent. Come up with constant task force that look at the decisions you've made. Of course, the board is able to support you as an organization and look at your strategy, but come up with teams within the organization that then say, you know what, we're looking at the decisions we're making. Are they objective enough? Are we just making decisions that are very subjective? Third thing, ensure coherence in the management processes. Now, another very critical and major thing is the board engagement. If you want to win, you've won on corporate strategy. You've ensured that as a leader, your strategy is on point, your resources are managed. You've ensured that your talent agenda is very well managed, and your talent agenda, your organization is healthy. You have a healthy organizational culture. You've ensured that your processes, your dynamics are ahead of mechanics, that you're ensuring that the business is growing as much as it should. You're beating the odds. So how then, what's next? You have the board. How are you engaging with the board? Now, the best CEOs, the best CEOs that of course those who have made it to the Forbes list, those who have made it to the Forbes list of the best CEOs, you'll notice that they pursue effective work environment with the board. Of course, the board is able to oversight, but unless you support your board, you will not go anywhere. So the first thing, how then do you support your board? How do you ensure maximum board engagement? As a CEO, as a CFO, as a leader of your organization, ensure that you're promoting a forward-looking agenda. And how can you do this? That go beyond discussions, because you realize that mostly the board will tend to advise on their fiduciary roles. For instance, we're advising on risk, we're advising on internal controls, we're advising on financial reporting. But you need to go beyond that. Have your board advise on elements such as the talent agenda. Have them advise on issues such as resilience. Have them advise on issues such as external communications and such other things. Now, the other thing very critical, external stakeholders, how you are engaging with the external stakeholders. We've spoken about the 80-20 rule. Identify your 20% of stakeholders that bring about 80% of value creation. Yeah, ensure that you're constantly communicating. And when you're constantly communicating, center on the long-term why. Now you realize that nowadays we are shifting towards emotional marketing. Those of us who may be very interested in marketing would maybe talk to us about emotional marketing. You realize that right now, as Purity, if I'm buying, say, a good or a service, I don't want to be told what exactly you're selling. So Lydia, I don't want you to come to me and tell me I'm selling training. I'm issuing you training and you learn about budgeting. I want you to tell me why. And Apple iPhones have been very good at doing that, where they tell you, we understand that you want simplified processes. Before you tell me what exactly you're giving me, I want to understand what the organization stands for. Look at, let us also draw our example to Safaricom. Look at what Safaricom is doing. That besides selling their goods and services, what they're doing is that they're doing constant CSRs, and they're making sure that they're communicating these CSRs to their stakeholders. Every single time you'll see Safaricom advert that doesn't tell you buy M-Pesa or use Safaricom or send money with Safaricom. All they tell you is that we've launched the Safaricom Academy, where the brightest of the brightest get to be schooled. They will only do an advertisement that is telling you that we are doing, hold on, that tells you that, say, we are just, for instance, we are just doing well with regards to how we are supporting systems, our CSR and such other things. So you need to focus on why. In your marketing, tell people why they need your services, or tell them why, as a SACCO, you are issuing loans. Make people feel like you share in their cause. Now, we saw that in the US recently, when they had the Black Lives Matter movement, you saw organizations such as KFC, they want to come out strongly and even iPhone and say, you know what, we are supporting Black Lives Matter. Why? Because the moment you're supporting your client's cause, they tend to become loyal to you. I will become loyal to say, if I'm environmental, I'm concerned with the environment, I'll become loyal to an organization that I feel is supporting this cause of ensuring that global warming is managed and such other things. So center on the long-term why. As you're communicating with your stakeholders, this is the time as a CEO, as a CFO, tell your stakeholders why you're doing what you're doing before you tell them what you're doing. Build resilience ahead of crisis, also with regards to communication and stakeholders. Finally, all these were with regards to how you're building the organization. But the other thing should be for you as a CEO, as a CFO, as a leader, and we're talking about personal working norms. You need to manage your time and energy as a CEO. That as you're doing all these corporate strategies with regards to the organization, alignment, organization, talent agenda, organization, board engagement, how are you improving the organization? But for you to do your best, even as the world is being disrupted, we're telling you that as a leader, manage your time and manage your energy. And how you can do this, of course, is by getting the right people in the team. When you have the right people in the team, it kind of reduces what you have to do, and therefore you can focus on strategy. You can focus on driving the organization to where they need to go, rather than focusing on tasks, on implementation of tasks. So you can have an oversight kind of authority. Now, how then do you achieve operational excellence? Now, whenever we talk about operational excellence, what basically we are talking about is for you to achieve continuous development to a point where you are the best in the game. Yeah, whenever we talk about operational excellence, basically we're saying you're achieving the best you can be as an organization. So we're saying that for you to remain relevant, you need to, because the world is changing so much, and we keep saying this, innovate around what is not changing, invest in what is not changing. Yes, it's everything else is changing. Technology is changing. All these other things are changing. So what then is not changing? Because the moment you identify what is not changing, then invest so much in what is not changing. Yeah. So operational excellence, we're asking you, how can you achieve operational excellence as a leader in your organization? How do you achieve operational excellence? Because as the world is changing, some things will never change. For instance, customer service. And I remember a very interesting survey was given to us very recently that says that some of the jobs that are not going to change are issues such as customer service, that people will always need good customer service, whether technology is changing, whether machines can now provide services. What I need at the end of the game, at the end of the day, is that whenever I call to complain about a good of service, I want politeness. I want to be engaged very well, and that will never change. So how then do you invent around and innovate around what is changing? How do you achieve operational excellence? Now, to achieve operational excellence, they usually a set of just about 8 things that as the organization you need to do to ensure that you're achieving operational excellence. First and foremost, you need to exceed customer expectations. For you to stay winning in a disrupted world, exceed customer expectations. If you realize that your clients need reports in a day, provide them in half a day. If you realize that your clients want you to serve them, the average waiting time they want to have is an hour, go beyond that. Do better, exceed customer expectations, because customer will always remain the person who ensures whether you remain relevant or not. So meet their demands, exceed their expectations, and that is the only way you stay relevant. The second thing, we spoke about this when we were talking about leadership in the previous slide, strategic direction and focus. Ensure that at your organization, everyone has a clear understanding of where you're headed in the next 10 years. Everyone understands that as Capable, we want to tap into new markets. Everyone understands that as maybe even Konza Technopolis, this is how much we want to achieve in the next 2 years, in the next 5 years. It's not just about our mission and vision statements, but we have a clear statement that says, how are we going to get there? We have a strategy paper that says that we are going to exceed customer expectations, and then you're listing down what exactly are our customer expectations. How then can we exceed them? Third very critical thing, employee involvement. We've spoken about employee engagement. Ensure that your employees are involved. And how can you make sure that your employees are feeling involved? First and foremost, make sure that they're properly engaged. Now, of course, we've read this and we've had people say this, that currently, of course, we are moving towards, in a few years, the workforce will majorly be 90% of millennials, yeah, because of the transition. And millennials want to be innovative. They want to do something beyond the ordinary. They don't just want repetitive tasks. They want to feel like they're part of something bigger. So how then do you improve employee involvement? Ensure that your employees are engaged maximally. If Purity comes to her work and she realizes that every single day all I get to do is reconcile, say, the bank statements, and I don't get to advise on something more, if she's a millennial, she will tend to feel bored and she will not achieve her potential in that organization. And there's no way you'll achieve operational excellence unless your employees are fully involved. So engage them maximally. Let them do beyond just repetitive tasks. Let them advise on issues such as governance. Make them feel involved in decision making. Make them feel involved in the preparation of budgets in the organization. Now, another thing that is very critical, leadership engagement, we've spoken about this, that you need to stand out as a leader. Go beyond just improving employee satisfaction. Help them become engaged. Another thing that is very critical, especially as a result of COVID-19, if you are to achieve operational excellence, you need to achieve superior safety, that you need to communicate with your clients that you've achieved superior safety. Now, this is very critical. And of course, whenever we talk about operational excellence, we'll talk about some methodologies. For instance, when you talk about Kaizen, they tell you how can you improve superior safety. Methodologies such as lean manufacturing, such as the Six Sigma. These are basically systems that help you achieve operational excellence. But one thing that is standing out so much right now, everyone is worried about their health. Everyone is worried about their safety in terms of COVID-19. So right now, if you are to win in a disrupted world, ensure that as an organization, you're communicating in your advertising, in your marketing, you're communicating that actually safety remains the top of our priorities for our staff. The moment, because you remember we spoke about emotional marketing, yeah, where we were saying that I don't just want you to tell me what you're selling me. I want to connect with you as an organization in an emotional level, because you realize that marketing, or rather purchase and purchasing of goods and services is not usually a logical decision. It's more an emotional decision. So unless you're tapping into my emotions and making me feel like, you know what, we are looking out for safety of our staff. And therefore, we are a good organization. Purity purchase from us. That will help improve how loyal your clients are towards you, and such other things. So ensure that as this time, as you're marketing, you are communicating that your staff are safe, that you're communicating, not just communicating, but you're also doing it, ensuring that your staff are safe. The other thing that is very critical, commitment to quality. For you to ensure operational excellence, for you to win in a disrupted world, is your commitment to quality. That every single day we are going to make sure that we're not just doing good enough, we're going to stand out. We're going to stand out in terms of quality. We're going to issue the best quality. We're going to have our clients being issued the best services, that if Purity is looking for someone else to offer services, they're able to look up to us. Yeah. And finally, pursue innovative products. We have said that right now not finally, but innovative products, try to achieve innovations as much as you can. pursue innovations because it will keep you ahead of the game. And finally, ensure process excellence. Whenever we talk about process excellence, look at your organization as a system, say some element of clockwork. The same way we've spoken about globalization being some kind of clockwork system. Look at your organization as that. Tighten the knot across every single part of the system. Look at your talent agenda, tighten the knot there, ensure you're bringing the right people on board. Look at your risk management systems, ensure you're you're doing the right things at that point. Look at risk management, coming up with strategies that factor risk and such other things. Ensure that you're doing the best with regards to this so that you ensure that you're winning. Now, finally, as we finish up, just give me a second kindly. Hi, sorry about that. So finally, as we finish, we're talking about governance. We've spoken about leadership. How can we improve leadership? And we say that governance has a very key pillar it plays in leadership. How you're working with the board as a CEO has a very key role. Yeah. So the final thing, as we are finishing up, we are saying that as you're working with boards, it's important to understand that boards are complex social systems and they're not just determined by the system regulations and the board dynamics, or rather the system regulations, that is their rules, their fiduciary rules. There's more to it. There's the issues of the board dynamics. Look at the board as a system. If you want to fix how well the board is performing as an organization, stop looking at it as just say a system that where if you fix the laws and regulations with regards to the operations of the boards, you fixed everything. That is the challenge we faced majorly as a country. We're saying our boards are performing, they're not performing well. But we have the right rules, we have the PFM law is very critical. Look at the Mongozo Code of Governance, very critical. It tells them how they need to conduct the operations. But is that enough? No, it's not. We're saying that it's not just about system requirements. You need to also consider elements such as the board dynamics. Who exactly, if you want to fix the board, look at the talent agenda. Who are you bringing into the board? As a country, who are the people we are putting in the various task forces we are having? Are these people who can be able to drive the strategy of the organization of this particular course? Another thing that you need to consider as you're fixing the board is the personal contributions. And that is the skills, the drives, the experiences. So if we are to fix our boards, we need to look at these three key elements. That as a CEO, as a leader, as someone who's very critical in the organization, look at all these elements. If you're fixing the board, is the board dynamics clear enough? Have you tightened the knot at this particular area? Look at the system requirements, the regulations, the roles and the incentives. Are they in order? Does the board have a clear understanding of how they need to perform their roles? And finally, look at who you're bringing on board. Look at things such as their skills, their drives, their experiences. Bring a wide array of skill set into the boards. Now, if we can remember, recently, Dr. Kitonyo spoke about board governance and effectiveness in boards, and he was talking about issues such as succession planning and the right skill set in the organization. That it's time for us to bring a wide array of skill sets in our boards, so that we're not just having, yes, finance people are awesome people to have in the boards. They will advise on so many things, but also bring people with other technical expertise spanning across various fields. Now, another thing that is very critical, we spoke about the agile philosophy. As you're looking at the governance of the organization, the board level, at governance, even at departmental level, that as you're looking at the agile philosophy, we've said that we need to pursue speed and resilience. Let's not just create efficiency. That is the backbone of the agile philosophy. That we need to have adaptability of adaptability of some kind. Where we are saying that it's important to realize that because the world is changing, the dynamics of the business are changing. Therefore, we need to have very adaptable strategies. That we need to change our strategies as need be. We need to change our budgets. We need to reallocate resources as much as we need to, because we don't know what is going to happen in the near future. Now, the other thing that is also very critical for us to keep winning, we've spoken about how we can win as individuals, as leaders in our organizations. So, how then can boards win? This is the time to ensure that the company has a clear vision for its future and an action plan to achieve it. That we understand that globalization is going to change. Maybe it will not end, but it's going to change. So, do we have a clear vision on how we are going to tap into this? As an entity, do we understand that maybe in the next 10 years, with regards to how some countries such as France and US are behaving with regards to globalization, probably that market will not be as suitable as it has been previously. So do we have a clear vision on how then we're going to remain relevant when one of our markets is kind of shutting down? So you need to have this clear vision for your future, have an actionable plan. Now, boards tend to have a very clear vision, but the failure is usually on the actual on how well they are being actioned. So have an actionable plan. Ensure that as a leader of your organization, there's an actionable plan on how to achieve it. If you're saying that the odds are that 1 in 12 companies are going to get to the upper quintile, how am I preparing my company to get there? What are the plans that I'm getting into to ensure that my company is getting there? The question we're asking you here as we finish up is how can you improve performance of your board to achieve long-term sustainability? So maybe I can take responses to that. Now, as I finish up, the question we are asking you finally is at organizational level, do you have a business continuity plan that is focused on ensuring you remain sustainable amidst a disrupted world? Does your business continuity plan consider things such as risk controls and how you can remain relevant when AI finally comes and takes over, say, the repetitive tasks in the organization? Are you going to remain sustainable? Does your continuity plan talk about innovations and how you can boost innovations among your workforce and such other things? Now, finally, we are saying that the capability, in case your business continuity plan does not put this into consideration, feel free to contact us. We can be able to help you modernize, develop, review, or update, or even enhance your policy frameworks. So you can find us on the numbers that are listed there. So you can talk to us in case you need to update your policies. We've done it for several organizations. You can contact us for advice on the same. So thank you so much. I'd like to hand over the session to Simon, and thank you so much for being a wonderful, wonderful audience. I'd like to take questions and maybe just reactions to the whole session. So thank you so much, and Simon, over to you.
Thank you so much, Purity. That was very, very well presented. And I think it's time to take questions and comments from the floor. So, esteemed delegates, it's time for you to air your concerns or questions with regards to what we have been presented to at this time. So you can just raise your hand so that I can pick you up in that order. If you are in a position where you think you cannot speak, you can just use the chat box here. We will still pick up the questions on the chat box. Yes, anyone with a question? Or a concern that you think deserves a bit of discussion? All right, all right. So as we let the information marinate in our minds from whatever we have just been shared, let me just remind you of the upcoming sessions. I have just shared on the chat box, if you can see. There is the next webinar on corporate liquidity risk, cash flow sustenance, and pre and post COVID-19. So you can just click on the link if you have not registered, so that you can register for it. And then we also have the next webinar on data security governance, on how data analytics drives business success. That will be on October 7th. So the link has also been shared for you there, for those who have not yet registered. So anyone with questions before we move to the next item? You can see most of us are giving gratitude on the chat box. I can see CPA Francis saying this has been a very richly prepared, systematically presented, and a very provocative presentation, especially to governors and leaders. Thank you, Purity. CPA Henry Misiani also says and affirms that that has been well presented. So Purity, you have done an awesome job. And I think our delegates, you have maintained a total number of 45 to almost 48 participants throughout the session. And I believe they are grateful. So there being no other questions or concerns, or if there is, we still have time to air them out. I see John saying something. On BCP, it looks like we need to consider many factors that have not been considered previously that can disrupt business. She adds that it goes beyond ensuring availability of people, systems, and facilities. And she says, thank you, Purity, for that insightful presentation indeed. So maybe I can just share my slides for a moment. Yeah, so as we plan to get further, just a reminder once again on the corporate liquidity risk session that is up next. We're looking at cash flow sustenance pre and post COVID-19. Remember the dates are on 30th September, that is on next Wednesday at the same time. And then we will be having this event that I've just projected on data security governance. Yeah, we'll be looking at how data analytics drives business success. And the event is scheduled to be the next Wednesday after the one on corporate liquidity risk. That will be on 7th of October. Then apart from our free weekly webinars, I also want to bring to attention the special events. We have the IFAS and the IFRS event, looking at asset management and finance accountability. This is a physical event, and it will be taking place in Machakos, Anzoni. We already have delegates registering for that. And if you think or you feel like you can also attend it, or your colleagues can also attend it, kindly reach out to us so that we can have you slotted in so that you can join others who have already registered for the session.
Okay.
Another event, we have the training on PFM policy. We're looking at public planning also, but IPSAS and IFRS compliance. So this one will be scheduled in 12 to 17. Then another major event, the public procurement law compliance event. And we will be we'll be linking it to strategic planning. So the event is scheduled to be on September 28th. I think that will be starting next week to October 3rd. So that will be running for 2 weeks, but you can also opt for 1 week. We will be in Mombasa. And then I think those are the ones that I can just pinpoint for now. So the point is that we already have our physical trainings going on, and we carry the trainings with regards to, we respect the MOH guidelines, and we observe all the social distancing rules. So you don't really have to worry about the possibilities of exposing ourselves to COVID-19 and such kind of troubles. So at that, I bring the session to an end. So if there's no one with a question, I've not seen anyone raise a question in that matter. So I believe we have all been grateful for all the areas that Purity has touched on, and that we don't have any major concerns on the same. Now at this point, I will welcome, maybe if Regan might have something to share to the delegates before we end the session.
Yeah, so thank you very much, Mwachi. This has been very insightful webinar, going by what we are seeing on the charts. And this has always been our aim, that every day when we present something in front of our delegates, then you are able to have an impact in their professional journey. That is part of our DNA, and we'll continue to ensure that you gain the best. We'll also have another free webinar next week on Wednesday, and we are doing all that we can to ensure that we also tackle your areas of concern. Thank you for your time. You've been a very patient audience, and we'll continue to ensure that the free CPD trainings remain part of our strategy until our foreseeable future. So thank you very much, Purity. And thank you very much for the rest of the delegates. Our physical training are currently ongoing. Last week we did Excel modeling for one of the organization, that is UN Circle. Our virtual lives ongoing, and our guidelines for physical trainings, we'll be able to share them with you. What we've done so far is in all our training facilities, we've ensured that we are training in groups of 3 to 4, and of course with physical distancing. So we'll continue to do that. And you also have an option to book just a training for your staff only. We also give that options. A number of organizations have taken that options, and we'll also consider any request that comes before us. So thank you very much. I will now invite if Joan is here. Joan, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you, Regan.
Okay, then just so you can give us a word of prayer and then we call it a day.
Yes, so thank you. Let's bow down for a word of prayer. So thank you, Lord, for the wonderful day that we've had. Thank you for the wonderful lessons that we've learned. We pray that you may give us the courage and the wisdom to implement what we have learned today. As we congregate back to our workstations, we pray that you may guide us, you may protect us, you may be with us. In Jesus' name I pray and believe. Amen. So over to you, back to you, Mwache.
Thank you, John. Thank you, John, for that. And the entire team for taking your time and sacrificing so that you learn. And so we hope that we meet again next time, next week on Wednesday. So have an awesome afternoon and God bless you.